Hello, and welcome to the Geopolitics Explained podcast. This is the podcast that delves into the intricate world of global politics, the past and present, while also exploring potential possibilities for what tomorrow could bring. I'm your host, Dylan. In each episode here of the Geopolitics Explained podcast, we'll break down complex issues into small, understandable chunks through in-depth scenario analysis. So come and join us as we navigate the ever-changing landscape of international relations, uncovering the stories behind the headlines and predicting trends that could shape the future of our world. I'm recording this on Wednesday, the 7th of August, and last Thursday we had some great news when we saw a prisoner swap occur involving many countries in the West and Russia and Belarus. It's quite rare, especially in the content I produce, to hear some positive news, so I thought, what a great topic for a podcast episode. So, regarding this prisoner swap, this is the biggest prisoner swap between Russia and the US since the Cold War. It has been in the works since Biden took office, and there are a few issues that were slowing this prisoner swap down. But before we get onto that, let's explore who has been swapped in this prisoner deal. Now, a few of the people who have been swapped as a part of this deal are fairly high profile. They've been covered in the news quite frequently. Firstly, I'll start with Evan Gershkovich, who is a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. He was arrested in Russia in March of 2023 on charges of espionage. Like many of these cases, there was no evidence made public whether they had any at all. The video when the plane landed back in the US saw Gershkovich give an interview and speak a few words, and he said that where he was being held in Russia, there are many Russian political prisoners who aren't known by name, and he wants to help free them from this point going forward, which is a brilliant use of time in my opinion. We also have Paul Whelan, who has been arrested since 2018. He was a former US Marine. And we've got Alsu Kermasheva, who is a US-Russian citizen. She was arrested in Kazan for not registering as a foreign agent, even though she is dual Russian citizenship. She was also arrested for misinformation. A few others. We've got Ilya Yashin, who is a Russian opposition leader. He is an ally of Alexei Navalny, who died in prison earlier this year. Navalny was intended to be a part of this prisoner deal before his unfortunate death earlier this year. We've also seen Oleg Orlov, a human rights defender, who is the leader in an organisation who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2022. He has been released. We've also seen Sasha Skochelenko released, who is an anti-war artist. Vladimir Kara-Murza, who is an opposition politician and activist. He is accused to the Kremlin of trying to poison him twice, back in 2015 and 2017, and he is a Russian UK citizen. Other names that have been released: Kevin Lick, a 19-year-old who was arrested for an accusation of emailing photos to a foreign state. He's a dual German-Russian national. There's also Rico Krieger, who was being held in Belarus. He was sentenced to death in Belarus. And a few weeks ago, we saw him beg the German government to intervene. On Tuesday, Lukashenko pardoned him. This being last Tuesday. And then the prisoner swap deal really got put into motion. There's also a lot of allies of Alexei Navalny who have been released. 3 in total. And Andrei Pivovarov, who is a Russian opposition politician. He was accused of carrying out activities of an undesirable organisation. Finally, we've got Dieter Voronin, a Russian-German political scientist, Patrick Schobel, who was a German arrested for possession of cannabis gummies. We've got German Moises, who was a German-Russian national. He was a lawyer, helping Russians obtain residency permits elsewhere in the world, outside of Russia. He was accused of treason. And that totals the 16 people who were released from Russia and Belarus. Now we shall move on to who Russia has received back in return. The big one that Russia received in return, who Putin had stated in the past, was his number one target that he wanted from any prisoner swap, was Vadim Krasikov. Vadim Krasikov was arrested in 2019 for shooting a Chechen-born Georgian who fought in the Second Chechen War and in the Russo-Georgian War. He also, after this, identified Russian spies in Georgia for the Georgian intelligence services. In Russia, by Russia, he was considered a terrorist, and so he was killed by Krasikov, who was an FSB agent and a Russian assassin, in broad daylight in Berlin. Others who were released were Artem Dultsev and Anna Dultseva, who were two Russian spies in Slovenia on long-term missions that often lasted decades. They were arrested in 2022. Mikhail Mikusin is also a Russian spy. We've seen Vladislav Kyushin. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison last year for his role in an insider trading scheme. Roman Seleznev was arrested in 2014 and given 27 years in 2017 for a cyber assault on US businesses. We've also seen Pablo Gonzalez, who is a Spanish-Russian national, who was a journalist for Spanish publications, often operating within Russia and Ukraine. He was accused of being a spy. Finally, we have Vadim Konoshchenok, who was arrested for a scheme to export American technology to Russia that could then be used in the war against Ukraine. I apologise for any bad pronunciation of any of those names, but I think it's important to go through everybody who has been released, especially when this is such good news in what has recently been an ocean of bad news. Now, why did this prisoner release really get rolling now? One particular thing that occurred that ensured that this prisoner swap really got rolling was Putin's interview with Tucker Carlson. He didn't completely cast the idea aside, and so this hope ended up speeding things along. Now, as I stated earlier, Krasikov, the Russian assassin, was the number one prisoner that Putin wanted, but he had been given life in prison in Germany. The Germans were struggling with this as a moral issue, especially when the crime occurred in their country. This is why in the prisoner swap deal, there are many Germans who have been released. There was also, as I mentioned earlier, the issue of Rico Krieger being sentenced to death in Belarus. This also likely sped up the process of this prisoner release. Also involved in this deal were Poland, Slovenia, and Norway when regarding the prisoners who were released for Russia and where these prisoners were arrested. Also involved heavily, which in my opinion is one of the biggest takeaways from this entire prisoner swap, is Turkey. Turkish intelligence coordinated this swap at Ankara Airport. Why I believe this is the biggest takeaway from this prisoner swap deal is because, first of all, there was no direct communication with Putin. It was communicated between Russian officials and the West, so we don't believe this is a signal of more renewed communication between Russia and the US specifically. Hence, what I think this proves is that Turkey has come out of this deal looking like an excellent neutral middleman who communicates with both sides and is trusted by both sides to be put into a position such as this. I think this could especially be quite prudent when it comes to communication over the war in Russia and Ukraine. Now, as I stated, this prisoner swap deal has been in the works since before Joe Biden even got into office 4 years ago. So this deal has been reviewed very positively. Firstly, for Biden's administration for finally getting it over the line, and also for Kamala Harris and her campaign in the US presidential election come November. It was described as a feat of diplomacy that only Joe Biden could have achieved. Biden stated it's good to have friends in the world, which seemingly could be interpreted as a dig at Donald Trump, who, through his America First policy, prioritizes a strategy of isolation. Trump also criticized this deal, questioning if any cash had been paid to Russia or Belarus as part of the deal. It was revealed after that this hadn't occurred, and so Trump was likely criticizing this deal because in the past he had stated that Biden wouldn't be able to get a deal done for Evan Gershkovich, the Wall Street Journal reporter, and ultimately Biden has got this done. This is a large boost for Biden, who, since the presidential debate, has been at a very low point in his political career. All in all, I think this is just some good news in an area of news that often doesn't have much good news, and so it's a topic that I really wanted to cover. Also, if you are to take anything away from it, Turkey's role in this is very important. It shows how trusted they are by both Russia and the West. And again, this could tie into future communication both sides regarding the Ukraine conflict. I don't think this occurs yet. I think we're still in the state of a war of attrition in Ukraine. They're seeing things move very slowly. If any front lines are broken, I think this conflict then moves very quickly towards a negotiation, but I don't think we're there yet. This has been another episode of the Geopolitics Explained podcast. I want to thank you all for listening. I greatly appreciate it. If you enjoyed this episode, why not leave a review on the podcast platform of your choice? And if you want more content like this, we write over on Substack. You can find the link for this in the description. Once again, I've been Dylan. Until next time, signing off.